The Point 2 release cycle of Empire at War Expanded is behind us, and we are well underway in working on the next big set of updates for the mods. While there will be other news posts and videos focusing on specific elements of the update as we go, and this video will be going over broad areas where we'll be focusing for the Point 3 release cycle for our next releases of Fall of the Republic and Thrawn's Revenge, as well as the first release of our Old Republic era mod, Revans Revenge. Imperial Reign, our Galactic Civil War mod, will not be releasing in the Point 3 cycle, but there may be some news about it coming up in the future. Revans Revenge, as our new mod with less of the groundwork done compared to the other two, will be getting a significant amount of the focus in this cycle, and the first release, covering the Mandalorian Wars through KOTOR 2, will include the basic setup and rosters for the Sith, Republic, and Mandalorian playable factions. The biggest focus across all of the mods for this release, though, is the galactic level, specifically the maps and everything that comes with that. Every single galactic map in Thrawn's Revenge is being rebuilt from the ground up, except for maybe some of the from the ground up layouts themselves, along with all of the progressive maps in Fall of the Republic, and of course every map in Revans Revenge since none of them existed yet. There are a few historical maps in Fall of the Republic which are more recent, so those won't be changing quite as much. The way we handle planet coding has allowed us to build up a huge library of planets and a pretty in-depth internal map with period-by-period breakdowns of planet ownership, meaning we have a pretty solid and wide basis to improve some of our planet selections in maps where we just didn't have as many options available before. This is especially true in Fall of the Republic's progressive maps. In Thrawn's Revenge, factions being added tended to mean their territory was just patched on top of older map layouts, so we're overdue for a fresh rebuild from first principles to ensure map flow and balance is where we want it to be. One major change here is that we're now able to make it so progressive maps with configurable era starts can have different planets based on which era you choose. So if you start in 12 ABY, we don't have to make the New Republic necessarily control 90% of the planets on the map. Instead, we're able to tailor which planets we have to the factions actually present there. While not every faction is in and ready, we are basing the map design on the final list of playable factions that we intend to have. So while you won't necessarily have fully fleshed out Hutts and Siruvi yet, you will start to see some more bare-bones versions of these factions be present on the map and fleshed out more as we go through the next few cycles. Maps have traditionally been split into full galactic progressive maps, historical maps focused on a specific war or conflict, and Infinity's maps based on a specific game mode or idea, like the single planet start maps or the former Empires at War map in Thrawn's Revenge. In Point 3, we're also including a fourth variety, regional progressive maps. These will largely be built on the same principles of the usual progressive maps, where era progression and era selection are both available, but they'll only focus on specific areas of the galaxy, allowing us to use some of the planets which will usually fall by the wayside in the larger maps, or shine some light on some factions which may not get the most attention in other situations. This also means certain historical scenarios get more naturally covered by default in these maps, leaving us more room to focus on actual historical maps more directly. For example, in Thrawn's Revenge, two of the scenarios that have been most heavily requested are a map focusing on the Rebellion or New Republic's early moves against the warlords in the south, including Eriadu, as well as a map focusing on the post-Zinj campaigns. These are things which could have been standalone historic maps, but will fit really well within what we'd like to do for regional progressive maps, giving us a lot more options. There'd also be things like the Unknown Regions getting their own standalone map for this. The hope for this release is to get at least one regional progressive map done for each mod. On the faction side, with 3 new factions to still flesh out in Revans Revenge, including at least some basic government mechanics for them, we will not be introducing any new playable factions in Thrawn's Revenge or Fall of the Republic just yet. Though, as I mentioned, many of the future playable factions, like the Hutts, will be getting their initial setup started in this release. We'll have a separate video going over the factional changes coming in Thrawn's Revenge, but there are a few higher level goals with the existing factions that I'll quickly sum up here. First, the New Republic will have its roster progression and research sorted out and updated along with a few new options. The Imperial factions just received most of the attention in the last update, and we're glad Legitimacy seems to have been very well received, so there will be a bit more cleanup and fleshing out of Legitimacy there, including some endgame goals for it, which we'll go over in its own update. Related to that, the Empire itself's leader progression will be getting some significant updates. The Hapens will get their government mechanics fleshed out a bit more as well, with their existing houses, including a couple new units for both space and ground, while making some adjustments to existing content based on feedback we've received so far, and particularly working to expand their currently very limited fighter selection. A big area of focus for this release, especially as we put more of a spotlight on the unknown regions more generally, will be the Empire of the Hand. They had the core part of their space roster redone a couple releases ago, but there are still a few space units to finish in that tied to their smaller member groups, which will also be fleshed out into further government mechanics. Beyond that, we're also beginning the long-awaited and long-needed overhaul of their ground roster, which will be entirely redesigned. In Fall of the Republic, there will continue to be the expansion and fleshing out of existing elements, including expanding the Republic command staff with new systems for choosing Jedi and clone heroes. Tactical maps will continue to see improvement over the .3 release as we introduce a few extra ones and continue our process of going through to overhaul or improve existing ones as needed. This can be as broad as redoing the entire playable area, or as minor as removing props that obstruct vision or changing lighting setups because they're either too dark or too bright. In space, map changes will largely focus on the visual elements for .3, like working to start some skybox updates, more planet model and texture improvements as well as variety, lighting improvements, and so on. Significant systemic overhauls to map layouts and how maps work will probably come in a later release. On ground, one element which we will be significantly focusing on are the indigenous units or militia, which we'll be redoing with some elements tying things into the galactic map more. There will also be additional work on new story missions. This will include trying to fix up certain existing ones like the Katana mission, but there will also be entire storylines added to certain galactic conquests, like the Hunt for Malevolence galactic conquest in Fall of the Republic. The .3 release will also see the return of our long-awaited survival mode, which has taken a few releases off and has been rebuilt by Kiwi. There's a few other game modes we've been playing around with which we'll hopefully be able to show off this cycle as well, though survival is the only one we can be reasonably certain we'll have in .3. Beyond all of that, we will of course continue to work on bug fixes and polish. So that is basically the overview of the major areas we're going to be focusing on the .3 cycle. Obviously this list isn't exhaustive, but hopefully you have a reasonable idea of what to expect. Each of these things will be shown off more and explained in more depth on their own throughout the next couple of months, so if you want to follow the updates as they happen or see them in action, make sure to subscribe here or to join our Discord server linked in the description.